It's still going to take the guy on the ground to go in there and evict the Iraqi forces. And that means infantry in coordination with artillery, and especially armor, will have to go in there and inch by inch, mile by mile, push them out and take Kuwait back and eliminate the Iraqi forces. And all the smart munitions and all the airplanes in the world are not going to change that fact that the only way you can hold ground is you got to stand on it. And that's where the ground forces are going to be involved. You actually have to own the ground. And the only way you're going to own it is by being on it.
War is unfortunate, but unfortunately there are wars. I think that any time that we give ourselves an edge, and it appears that technological edges are proving their worth here. Lives are saved in that sense too, because we bring more boys home.
That's right, and this is not a war that we were looking to get into, but at least the technology that's been developed in the last 20 years is going to bring more of our people home and actually save lives.
This is the Army's A-64 Apache, built by McDonnell Douglas. This is what the pilot sees with the pilot night vision system. That's what he flies off of. He has a horizon bar, heading tape, has torque information. You can also tell what the front seat is doing as far as weapons go.
Jim, how many people are in this helicopter?
It's a two-man crew. There's a pilot in the rear seat, which is different from what the Air Force does. They stick their pilots in the front. And the co-pilot gunner's in the front seat. He's basically the weapons operator. Its big selling point is its night fighting capability. All this footage you see on the screen that has the green tint is at night. It just looks like green TV. The pilot can fly off of that, and the gunner also has a flare, and he uses it for target acquisition designation.
Jim, what kind of missions will this helicopter be running primarily in Desert Storm?
Well, it can really vary depending on what is necessary. It can run escort missions. Of course, its main role is anti-tank. That's what it was designed to do. And because of the sensors on board, it has a very good night fighting capability. So I would suspect it would be some type of night anti-tank role. We're actually there to support the ground commander. So because of our mobility, we can come around the flanks, we can shoot them head on. There's many different roles we can take there, but our main role is to kill tanks and put a lot of steel on target in a short period of time, and of course exactly where that ground commander wants it, because we can move over the ground so quickly. We're not inhibited by terrain at all. The helicopter itself is armored. The seats themselves are armored. There's a blast shield between the two seats. But probably our biggest asset is the helicopter was designed to take hits and still be able to fly home. And what do we do if we get shot at? We mask. We're always close to the terrain anyway. So if we start seeing tracers coming at us, of course we're just going to take evasive action, get below a hill, get below the trees, whatever it takes, so we don't have line of sight with that fella that's shooting at us. Hellfire missile is a pretty amazing piece of equipment. It is laser guided. It has a fairly healthy warhead using the shape charge concept, and it'll defeat any known armor at this point. It travels just a little bit above the speed of sound, so it's very fast. The system is very easy to use. All the gunner has to do is put the crosshairs on the target and pull the laser trigger, and that's all there is to it.
Hussein's tanks usually are dug in.
Well, see the angle that missile's coming in? It's an advantage that it comes in from an altitude at a high angle, because if a very little portion of the tank is exposed, then this gives the advantage of coming down from altitude at a high angle, say approximately 45 degrees, instead of straight on shot. So it gives you more of the target to see.
That's the vulnerable spot on a tank, is its turret roof or the rear of the tank. How about that shin cannon?
Well, that's a 30 millimeter chain gun, they call it. It's lengthless ammo. Fires about 625 rounds a minute, very effective against light-skinned vehicles. These are rockets. The difference between rockets and missiles rockets are ballistic. Once they leave the tube, they're on their own, whereas a missile is guided all the way to the target. The device you see mounted here on the pilot's helmet is called the HDU, or Helmet Display Unit. This is his view of the FLIR that is sent back through electrical channels, and it's actually a cathode ray tube sitting alongside of his face there. It gives him all the FLIR imagery that allows him to see the terrain outside. Here we're looking at the maneuverability of the helicopter. It is just utterly amazing. Having flown helicopters with what they refer to as teeter-totter systems, or just two-bladed, this thing is really amazing to get into and fly. You got to hang on. It's very crisp. It's what pilots call the handling characteristic. They say it feels like a much lighter helicopter because it actually weighs over 10,000 pounds. It's a pretty good-sized helicopter. And it has tremendous tail rotor authority. The aircraft is really overpowered. And now McDonnell Douglas is fitting them with 701 Charlie engines. This is a General Electric 700 engine in this aircraft. And it's increased horsepower, so these guys are going to have more handfuls of power to pull in the future. Here's demonstrating the maneuverability again. It's just fantastic. The helicopter design itself is pretty amazing. It's designed to withstand fairly horrendous crashes and the pilots walk away. Hovering a helicopter is a very difficult experience when you first start trying to do it. A lot of pilots liken it to sitting on a greased marble.
Now, I don't believe this. He's going in reverse there.
Oh, this thing will fly backwards very quickly. This is a future capability, the Mistral, the Sidewinder, which is a air-to-air missile. This is future capability, growth potential for the aircraft. We could see these in the future.
How many rockets does each helicopter usually carry?
Of course, the load varies. They're 19-shot pods, so he can carry up to 4 of those. But normally the configuration is 2 of those 19-shot pods with 8 Hellfires. And a normal load on the 30 millimeters, probably about 500 rounds, although he can carry up over twice that. One of the concepts of using a helicopter, of course, is taking advantage of its mobility and the massive strike. You can put a lot of lead on target very quickly with one of these. And so it breaks the will of the enemy, so to speak. Here we're at the forward area rearm point, and they can pretty much upload this thing and send it out again in about 20 minutes.
How many people does it take to rearm one of these helicopters?
Well, actually, it only takes one, but it takes one a lot longer. This is the AH-1 Cobra, produced by Bell. Was bought by the military in the mid-60s, basically a Vietnam-era helicopter. The differences between this helicopter and the Apache are basically the rotor system on this one is what they call a teeter-totter or semi-rigid. It only has 2 blades. The canopies or the windscreens, as you can see, are rounded as opposed to the flat plate that the Apache has. This one has skids as opposed to wheels that the Apache has.
I see it's got a nose cannon too. Is that the same type as the Apache?
It's similar. This is a 3-barrel 20 millimeter though. It again is electronically linked to the pilot's head, but this time it has a mechanical magnet that attaches to the back of the pilot's helmet. But what's nice about it is all you have to do is turn your head and look at the object and pull the trigger, basically, and you'll have rounds on targets.
I see these rockets coming out of the Cobra and those little fins popping open.
Well, the rockets are called a folding fin aerial rocket. What those fins do, they're spring-loaded to the open position. When they're in the tubes, they're held down flat. When it comes out of the tube, they spring out. And what they do is they just stabilize the rocket in flight.
This looks like a tow-type missile.
Yes, it is. This tube-launched, optically tracked, wire-guided missile. It's an anti-tank weapon. You can see the wires coming out of the back of the missile. Well, those wires actually are the length of the range of the weapon system, in excess of 3,000 meters. So you have an electronic link to the helicopter for the full time of flight of the missile. Here you can see it. It just guides itself right down. All the gunner has to do is keep his crosshairs on the target, and the computers on board the helicopter send commands to the missile through those little wires to correct its trajectory. Here's a Hellfire missile off of the Cobra. Of course, it's laser guided and doesn't have wires on the back of it like the tow missile does. Here's an air-to-air missile.
So if these helicopters were attacking ground targets and suddenly an Iraqi fighter came at it, it would have some defensive capability?
Oh, yes, definitely. Not to mention that it's just difficult for the jet fighter to get into the low terrain and realm of an attack pilot or attack helicopter. We got the Cobra in a desert environment. As you can see, with the wind from the rotors, it really does kick up a fair amount of dust. In fact, it takes a little bit of training to learn how to land a helicopter in a true desert environment, because you have to keep the airspeed up as long as possible. Otherwise, you get into what they call brownout. You just create a cloud of dust that you can't see out of. It can be very disorienting.
There's a lot of debris that gets kicked up too. Does that ever clog the air intakes on those engines?
Well, they have what they call particle separators on the engines, which are supposed to clean out the majority of the dust and the debris. Here he's talking to his armament personnel, I guess giving them the load configuration that he wants for his next mission. There's an Army AH-1 F model Cobra, fully modernized Cobra.
Does this one have a single engine?
Yes, it does. You can see the boom out the right side. That's an air data system that works through his fire control computer and gives him solutions for his weapons. The little V-shaped thing above the pilot's head is a wire cutter. Of course, that's one of the problems of flying helicopters at low altitude, is that's where all the wires are located. So we've decided as Army aviators that let's just cut them. Fly right through them then.
This is the M1 battle tank, the Army's premier battle tank, the Abrams battle tank, named after General Creighton Abrams, who was General Patton's premier battalion commander in World War II. This tank has just come into the inventory in the 1980s. This tank represents a quantum leap from the M60 series tank. It revolutionized armor warfare. It is much faster, much better protected, larger gun, and better crew protection than the M60 series that is replacing. This tank is able to fight in just about any kind of environment. The M1 here, as you can see, can go on just about any kind of terrain. Sand, woods, even for assaults in an ocean environment, such as the Marines are trying to experiment here with. The primary power plant for this tank is the Lycoming 1500 horsepower gas turbine engine. The engine compartment is separated, consists of an engine and a transmission. The AGT 1500 horsepower turbine engine is state-of-the-art. The DDA automatic transmission also delivers a lot of torque to the sprocket, which drives the track. The suspension system on this tank is superior to the M60. It's able to go over much rougher terrain, giving the crew much better protection. The crew compartment consists of a driver's compartment and a turret compartment. 4 people operate this tank. You have a driver, a loader, gunner, and the man directing all the action is the tank commander. This tank represents state-of-the-art in that the turret is designed to have the ammunition separated from the crew compartment. That's only less than 2.5 meters high, has a low noise level from its engine, and it gives off virtually no smoke from the engine, making this a quiet and hard to see tank. When it doesn't want to be seen, it can also pop out smoke or put a smoke trail behind it, thus limiting visibility to the enemy. The NBC system is built into the M1 system, and it filtrates toxic fumes. Once the tank is buttoned up internally, the tank has a fire protection device. It's a little sensor that when it senses heat inside the turret, it kicks off a foam fire extinguisher that fills the turret. Cross-country capability is outstanding. It can go 30 miles an hour cross-country. It can accelerate to almost 20 miles an hour in less than 7 seconds. It's not quite a sports car, but on a battlefield 0 to 20 miles an hour is the difference between life and death. The range is over 300 miles cruising at 20 miles an hour.
Can it shoot while it's driving 30 miles an hour across country?
This tank is designed to shoot on the move. A moving tank is tougher to hit, tougher to kill. This is the Canadian Army Trophy Cup that takes place in Europe every 2 years. They bring in tank units from across NATO, and the tank units compete against each other to see who can destroy more targets in a simulated battlefield environment. This is the ammunition breakdown on the tank. As you can see, the ammunition is placed in the back of the turret, isolated from the crew. That way, if the ammunition is hit, the ammunition will blow up inside a special compartment within the turret, keeping it away from the crew. Here we see what the gunner's looking at, the stabilized versus the unstabilized target acquisition or tracking that the gunner would see. And this is inside the turret. What we have is the crew. We have the tank commander, the loader, and now the gunner. The gunner, of course, is the man who controls the firing of the main weapon. That is the 105 millimeter, or on the M1A1, the 120 millimeter cannon. Here we have a night sight. The tank does have thermal imaging, which is an outstanding feature. This tank will control the night during Operation Desert Storm. It can see in the night just like daylight. The gunner also has the ability to select any kind of ammunition he wants. He has different types, some for killing infantry, some for destroying tanks. As you can see, just about every time he lays that crosshair on a target, he's going to hit it. The crew's got several machine guns that will help protect the tank. One is a coax machine gun fired by the gunner. The other is a 7.62 machine gun located up on top, which is used by the loader. And the third machine gun is a 50 caliber machine gun used by the tank commander to engage targets that are close by. This 50 caliber machine gun can be used while the tank commander is buttoned up.
It looks like it's pretty rough to ride in that thing when you're cruising at 30 miles an hour, is it?
This tank is a sports car. The suspension in it is extremely smooth, and that coupled with its low center of gravity make the M1 tank one of the best riding armored vehicles that the Army has. It's the Cadillac of armored vehicles in the American inventory. Here we see the recovery crews pulling the engine out. The engine comes out in one piece with a transmission attached to it. It's very simple to maintain. The engine can be pulled and a new one put in within a few hours. This is the M60 main battle tank, currently found in the United States Army inventory. This tank is currently being used by National Guard units and by U.S. allied forces. The M60 tank series was a development that came out of research in the late 50s to develop a replacement for the M48 tank. The M60A3 can trace its roots back to World War I, when the British and Allied forces found that the trench warfare of World War I and the use of massive artillery machine gun was stifling infantry attacks. The result was the metal tank. The tank brought new mobility to the World War I battlefield. Tanks were used extensively toward the end of the war. Small tanks, big tanks, all kind of tanks saturated the battlefield. Here we see a driver who obviously needs some driver training. World War II brought the tank into its true domain of being the king of the battlefield. Tanks were used by all forces in just about all campaigns, from North Africa, the Pacific, to Europe, with many variants being used. The tank saw rapid development during World War II. The tank came into its own and became the key player or the key fighter on the battlefield. World War II could not have been won without the tank. Today's M60 tank is a derivative of the tanks found in the 50s. The M60 tank, until recently, was the premier battle tank of the United States Army. The tank is still a good one. It can go 30 miles an hour across country. It has a long range of over 350 miles. It has a modern cannon, the M68, which is a British cannon. The M60 tank also has a 4-man crew, much like the M1. It has a driver located in the forward part of the hull and 3 men in the turret. The tank has excellent cross-country mobility to go through mud, sand, wooded areas. In a desert environment such as Kuwait or Iraq, this tank will be outstanding. The visibility, because of the high turret and cupola, will give the tank commander excellent forward visibility to identify and find targets. The M60 has been proven in combat in the 67 war and the 73 Yom Kippur war with the Israelis. And the Israelis like the tank. So the U.S. forces are going in with a battle-tested tank. The M1 has never been in a true firefight, and this is going to be its baptism of fire. However, if it meets its expectations, it's going to be a world premier fighter on the battlefield. These tanks are pretty much on par with the Iraqi T-72 tanks. It's going to boil down to who's the best crew. Both the T-72 and the M60 series tanks are about equal in capability. I think the improved variants, the M60A3 with its thermal sights and improved fire controls, will have firepower superiority over the T-72. However, the crews are what's going to make the difference. And the U.S. crews are highly trained. The M60 has been refined over the years to where it now has a laser rangefinder, stabilization system, and a night thermal sight. This tank is equal to the M1 when it comes to fighting.
Is it as accurate as the M1?
The cannon on this tank is as accurate as the M1. However, the new M1A1 with the 120 millimeter cannon will outshoot this tank, mainly because the round can go out further. But up to 2,500 meters, this tank cannot be beat. You can get at least a 50% chance of getting first round hit at 2,500 meters consistently. In a desert environment such as Operation Desert Storm, this tank will be a good fighter for the armor force. This tank is very quick to reload. A good loader can load it in 4 or 5 seconds. So the tank almost has a rapid fire capability where you can fire 8 to 10 rounds in 1 minute. That's servicing, as we say in the Army, a lot of targets in a short amount of time. The tank is extremely serviceable. The back deck comes unbolted very quickly. There's just a few bolts to hold it down. Mechanics can quickly disconnect the electrical connections and fuel lines to the engine. Once the engine is disconnected from its electrical and mechanical linkages, it's quickly pulled out, can be placed on the ground as a whole unit, and put back into the tank after it's repaired within a few hours. The M60A1 and M60 series is an old workhorse of the Army, and it should be around well into the future. It hasn't outlived its usefulness yet, and still has a lot of potential on the battlefield. This system's been around for a few years. was primarily built as an anti-aircraft missile, but in the late 80s, it was developed as an anti-missile missile. And as everyone knows, in the current war, it's become quite successful at knocking down Scuds, becoming a Scud buster. Jim, how big is this missile?
Well, it's actually larger than you'd expect. It's 17 and a half feet long and it weighs about 2,000 pounds, so it's a pretty good sized missile.
What's the range of this missile? We've seen it in action quite a bit.
Well, I believe the slant range about 38 miles. It, of course, detects an incoming missile through radar, and it has phased array radar, so it can detect them at a long distance out. And it tracks it and launches a missile at a specified point and tries to shoot the missile down from a high altitude to reduce the amount of wreckage coming down. But of course, in a Scud missile, there's a lot of debris with it. Its weight is over 7 tons, so that's a lot of debris coming down.
By the way, Jim, the warhead on this is over 70 pounds. That's a lot of plastic explosive flying through the air. The Army is in control of this weapon system because the Army is in charge of the air defense for the military. A lot of people may think that the Air Force has to knock down other airplanes, but in fact, it's the Army's air defense systems that do the knocking down. We call them us tankers call them duck hunters. The Patriot system is totally mobile. It's mounted on truck systems along with a radar. The system is quickly put into place. The launch systems are set up near whatever area that you want to protect. It has quite a large footprint. That means it can protect a very large area. Everything is highly mobile. This is made for a modern-day mobile warfare type environment. The crews quickly put it into place. The radars, the phased radars, are quickly set up nearby. And within a few hours, this system's ready to go.
We were talking that earlier we said that this missile was designed to shoot down aircraft. I guess the change they had to make to it was fairly sophisticated. I imagine it's hard to shoot down a rocket in flight.
Especially with another rocket. Probably an analogy of one bullet trying to hit another bullet in mid-flight. And that's about what we're seeing with the Patriot. Its accuracy is uncanny. Once the missile system is set up, it's positioned, a launcher is raised, and it's ready to fire. By the way, the launcher system itself is nothing more than a pre-assembled box with a rocket in it. It comes from Raytheon in that configuration. There's no preloading the rocket in the box or the launcher. It's one unit. The Patriot has never been in a combat situation before, and the performance of it during Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm has been amazing. Its accuracy has been over 95%, and this system is going to be one of the premier weapons of the Army for the rest of this century.
And when they built the A-10, they built it for a reason, and that was the Soviet armor threat. Mm-hmm. And with the Central European armor threat, they wanted something that would be able to get in there down in the low-altitude structure and use a 30-millimeter gun to take out tanks. And it's specially designed to do that. It uses both the 30-millimeter gun and Maverick missiles primarily to do that. And it does that exceptionally well. There's no other aircraft ever built that will do it any better.
It's a tremendous, really a single-purpose airplane, is close air support to take out the armor threat. And since Iraq in Desert Storm has over 4,000 tanks, this is going to be a very effective weapon, I think, to help take out those Iraqi tanks. The A-10 ground attack. Tell us about the history of this airplane.
Well, it is in its lineage. It has fine airplanes from Republic Aviation. And Republic is built back in the World War II timeframe, the Thunderbolt. And this is named after the Thunderbolt. The Thunderbolt II is when it was published. Now it's been affectionately known as a Warthog to all its pilots and the rest of the Air Force since that time. But Republic has built airplanes like the F-84 and the F-105 and now the A-10, which they all have one thing in common. They're built very sturdily. They can take a lot of punishment and still come home. And that's true of every airplane the Republic's ever built. So they have a deep heritage of air-to-surface attack. Its advantage is it's sturdy. It's got an armor bathtub around the pilot to prevent the pilot from, to protect him in that low altitude environment. It has some drawbacks. It's not very fast. Runs about between 300 and 400 knots in its mission, but it's exceptionally maneuverable at low altitude, so they can use the little hills and valleys and run around in the mountains. They try to avoid any enemy fire that might be used against them.
Yeah, we're seeing some of that here as we watch these aircraft maneuver. The guy pops it up to 90-degree bank and just basically turns on his wingtip as he maneuvers to take out tank after tank.
It'll be used heavily in the ground battle to offset the armor and other types of both tanks and other kinds of armor. It's a good feeling if you're on the ground and to see that airplane around, because it does protect the troops. I had an opportunity at one time to do some exercises where I was on the ground when the A-10s were around, and in a pickup environment where they come in and rescue, pretend that you're a downed airman, and they come in with helicopters, and the A-10s provide escort for those helicopters coming in. I mean, believe me, with that 30-millimeter gun on board, it keeps the bad guys' heads down.
Yeah. In fact, the first pilot that we rescued in Desert Storm was a pilot that ejected over western Iraq, and some A-10 drivers were airborne about 10 hours, I understand, as they went up and flew cap while the helicopter came in to pick this guy up, and they destroyed a couple of trucks that were trying to pick up this downed pilot that we had in the early days of Desert Storm. The airplane is, as you said, really a highly maneuverable aircraft. As you can see, it's got twin engines, both engines mounted back on the tail, which are high to keep them out of basically the lethal zone of the fire, hopefully. And also, it's got only one pilot. It's a single crew airplane, and workload's pretty high, I'm sure, when you get down there amongst the trees and you're trying to maneuver to kill those tanks.
Well, if the A-10 pilot sees that he's being targeted on his raw screen, then he'll take evasive action and then also be pumping flares and chaff out, normally on a pre-programmed amount that is set to offset a specific threat. So he is defended in that way. He also is defended by its maneuverability at low altitude and its ability to get down and hide behind hills and that sort of thing, which is unique to the A-10. Well, the Air Force is starting to use the aircraft in a couple of roles. We just described what we used to call the Sandy role. That's Sandys are the escort pilots for the helicopters going in the air-sea rescue. They also are using it for observation. Back in Vietnam, we used the propeller-driven aircraft, the bird dogs, for observation. In this case, they're now using a much more heavily armored aircraft that has some self-defense capability for observation. So now we have the A-10 and we now have the O-A-10.
So this airplane will be out there hovering over the battlefield, and we'll be able to call in artillery from the Marines or the Army or whoever.
Call in fighters for fighter strike as well.
Well, that's tremendous. Very versatile airplane. Gary, one of the, I think our great advantages over there in the air war is the recently developed AWACS aircraft. You've flown as a fighter pilot using the AWACS. Tell us about it. What does it do for you?
Well, the AWACS does two things. It helps you control the air battle, but in addition to that, it also gives you the deep look into the enemy's area. It watches things on the grounds in terms of airplanes getting ready to launch and launching, and gives you early warning of any threat that would be coming up. We used to call that ground controlled interceptor, GCI, and now we have an airborne capability to provide that the controlled intercept. So it provides the fighter pilot extra sets of eyes. It looks out beyond where your radar looks and tells you what kinds of threats are coming your direction. So if, say, a flight of 4 aircraft were to be launched at a Iraqi airfield, AWACS would know that. They would also control the air battle. They would pair F-15s or F-16s or other types of fighters against that flight of 4 and direct the air battle up to the point where the pilots gain access to that flight of 4. They pick them up on their radar and then they take over. The AWACS controllers are trained weapons controllers, people that know the capabilities of all of our airplanes and the capabilities of the fighters or bombers they're going against. And so they can control you in the environment, provide you information to be able to go out and do your job.
We've all seen pictures of the civilian control of airliners and flights of the United States by the air traffic control centers, people sitting there looking at the radar scopes with the little dots and stuff. And basically airborne, that's what's going on inside of that AWACS. They've got their radar, they've got the other listening devices, and there's a crew of officers in the back of this airplane that are sitting there looking at those scopes controlling the air battle.
That's correct. And they do a fine job of it. It's a very high-tech capability, much better than you have in your air traffic control centers.
Are these also the jammers that we hear about? Does that go along with the AWACS, or we have other airplanes up there that are doing the jamming?
We have other aircraft that have those special missions.
Yeah, you don't hear much about them, but those are very effective for a fighter pilot when he goes in knowing that we've got airplanes standing out jamming their frequencies to blind their radar, their SAM sights, and everything like that. It gives you a comfortable feeling to know you can go in with their defensive system suppressed.
It's almost like whoever controls the trons will control the battle.
That's right. Yeah.